Welcome back. So we've been talking a lot about the legacy of Pope Francis and where the Catholic Church might be headed following his passing. But of course, the single greatest influence on what the Church will do next is the selection of a new Pope. The College of Cardinals are expected to meet in a conclave beginning in early to mid-May. So here's some basic information about that process. There are 135 cardinals that will act as electors of the next Pope, meaning they're under the age of 80. Overall, Pope Francis appointed about 80% of the voting age cardinals, so his influence will certainly weigh heavily on this procedure. Most of the cardinals are from Europe, but there's increasingly influential contingents from the Americas, from Africa, and from Asia. It takes a 2/3 or 90 vote from those cardinals for someone to become Pope, and the cardinals are sequestered and sworn to secrecy. The voting itself is done in the Sistine Chapel. And since about the 1900s, the process has taken 4 days or less. And we're, of course, all familiar. You're seeing it there with the smoke signals that come after each vote. Black smoke for no pope, white pope for we have a new pope. So who's it going to be? And to discuss all of that, let's go ahead and bring in David Gibson, director of the Center on Religion and Culture at Fordham University. David, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So let's take this name by name, and I feel like the favorite that a lot of people are talking about is Pietro Perilin, the Italian cardinal, the Vatican Secretary of State. What's the case for him? What do we need to know about him?
Well, you're right. He's the Vatican Secretary of State, essentially the number 2 in the Vatican, not particularly close to Francis. Francis was his own man, his own operator. But Perilin is a longtime diplomat. He would be a safe pair of hands. You know, he'd be the guy who you'd say, okay, he would continue things, but he would be a little calmer. He would be more of an institutionalist, less disruptive. So he's kind of the safe bet. He'd also be something of an Italian restoration. You know, we always think of the papacy as an Italian institution, but there hasn't been an Italian pope since John Paul II, the Polish pope, was elected in 1978.
And there will be several Italians on this list, but let's move away from Italy for just a moment, because I feel like the number 2 name that gets talked about a lot is Luis Antonio Gocom Tagle from the Philippines. The church is hugely influential there. He'd be the first Asian pope. Are we going to see another history maker here? What do we need to know about him?
There's a lot of buzz about him. There had been. He was called the Asian Pope Francis. And, and he studied here in the United States. He's a wonderful guy, very personable, a lovely guy. Getting into the right age. Again, age is also something. We talked about Perilin. He's 70, I think. Cardinal Tagle is about 67. They don't want somebody who's too young, because you don't want a pope for like 30 years. So, 70s is kind of a good age, but they have to be in good shape. Tagle, again, he would represent Asia. The other thing is Pope Francis brought him to work in the Vatican a few years ago. That's very important, because you're the Bishop of Rome. You're running, your closest collaborators are in the Roman Curia. You have to know some Italian. You have to know how Italy operates in order to be Pope, so that he's had that experience. But the problem is he didn't manage some of the departments very well, and he got kind of pushed aside. So his legacy is very much lovely guy. He would win the popular vote, but is he going to win the vote in the Sistine Chapel? Not so sure.
And let's move on and talk about the Catholic Church's growing influence in Africa, because there are 2 names being talked about a lot. Let's talk about them one by one, their similarities and differences. Let's begin with Fridolin Ambongo Bazungo from the Democratic Republic of Congo. What do we need to know about this gentleman?
Well, he's also very prominent. He's head of the wider African Bishops' Conference. He has a high profile. He's very big on migrants and very in sync with the Pope. That way, he was one of the Pope's, kind of had a kitchen cabinet of advisors, Pope Francis did. But he's also very strong against gay rights and very outspoken on that when Pope Francis suggested that priests could do informal blessings of same-sex couples. He pushed back hard and fast. So that's, that it depends how it, breaks inside the conclave. Do they want somebody who would be a little tighter on those sexuality issues and a little more proactive on the social justice stuff? Then Ambongo would be your guy. And of course, African cardinal from sub-Saharan Africa. What a statement. The other one is Cardinal Turkson, as you mentioned.
From Ghana, yes, correct.
Yeah, he's had a long career in the Roman Curia. So, again, like I said before, it's nice, it's lovely to have somebody from far reaches of the world, Asia, Latin America, Africa, but they have to be the Bishop of Rome. And so Turkson's got that experience.
And let's talk about one more Italian cardinal, a la some of the experience and management that you're talking about as being necessary. What do we need to know about Cardinal Matteo Zuppi? He's head of the influential Italian Episcopal Conference, as I understand it. Does he stand a chance?
He does, for a lot of reasons, in that he's very much in the mold of Pope Francis. He was elected by his fellow bishops in Italy, as you noted, of head of their national bishops conference. That says something, because you have these national blocks like the Americans, 10 Americans, but they're divided. They're on very different pages. If he can get the very large and influential Italian bloc behind him, that gives him some real momentum. And again, he would be a continuation of Pope Francis if that's what they want.
And I think you segued very nicely into someone who could potentially represent this sort of sizable change from the Pope Francis era, and that would be Peter Erdo from Hungary. What do we need to know about him? I've already mentioned he's different. How is he different?
He's different. He would be much more of a conservative, much more of a throwback, not a flamethrower. Very quiet. I think he's 72 years old or so. Very close to Viktor Orban, the Hungarian leader, who's been very much a leader, very much of an ally of Donald Trump, for example. But Erdo has respect, across the aisle, but not at all in the same vein as Pope Francis. So that would be seen as kind of a switch back to the right if you were elected. But, the thing is, as you said at the top, Francis appointed 80% of the cardinals that will elect his successor. Not all of them agreed with him, so there was some mixture there. But the real hard right, real strong conservative camp has really been diminished, and there's no real strong campaign manager for them. If anyone's going to represent that bloc, it would be Peter Erdo of Hungary.
So this perhaps is that lane if the conclave starts steering in that direction. I want to ask you about one candidate I just think has kind of an interesting profile. I don't know if based on some of the age stuff you were saying he has a real chance, but we have Cardinal Piero Pizzala, my favorite name to say, everyone's favorite name to say at this point, but he's 60. So, what sort of chance does he have? But he has a lot of foreign affairs experience, which could be absolutely crucial to the Vatican right now, right?
Yeah, it really would. It'd also be one of those prophetic choices. The way in 1978, they elected Karol Wojtyła, Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow in Poland. That was behind the Iron Curtain at the time in the Soviet bloc. That was a prophetic statement by the College of Cardinals in 1978. Imagine picking the Latin Patriarch of Cardinal from the Holy Land, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, at this time in the Middle East and in the world. Also, he's Italian born. He knows Italy, he knows Italian. He's a Franciscan, an order priest. And he's funny. He's got a lot of support in the media sphere, for what that's worth, among conservatives and more liberal folks. They all see him. He offered to exchange himself for one of the hostages, for example, the Israeli hostages taken by Hamas. That's a powerful witness. But again, a little too young, maybe 60 years. These days, Pope Francis died at 88. This guy could go till 90. Do you want that long a papacy? That really works against him.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, we'll have to leave it there based on time. For maybe 10 seconds, any sort of closing thoughts? I don't mean to turn this into a horse race. That's not fair. This is deeply meaningful to many people. But do you have a favorite? Is it an inclination here?
No, I don't. Anybody who says they do is foolish. Every time I've covered 2 conclaves before, and I've been wrong all the time. So everybody's been wrong. Nobody picked Bergoglio to be Francis last time. So I'm not that foolish. But I do have to say the one thing you have to keep in mind is the Italians say, he who goes into the conclave a pope comes out a cardinal. They don't like favorites. They don't like people doing what we're doing, which is picking favorites. When you see some of these people getting a lot of buzz on the outside, the cardinals inside are going to say, whoa, that's, we're not going to just go with the momentum here. This is our choice.
Well, thank you, David. And that'll do it for our look at the legacy of Pope Francis and what comes next for the Catholic Church, and a look at who might be the next pope, which you just heard there. I hope this was helpful information for those of you out there to understand one of these big world events we're all going to be watching for a little while now. I'm Henry Rosoff. You have a great day.